Here we are in Taylor Park, Colorado, surrounded by the majestic Rocky Mountains and the Continental Divide. This is where my fly fishing career began more years ago than I want to mention.
Today we like to go over some of the fundamentals of casting, hopefully to get you to be a better caster, because let's face it, if you can't get the fly to the fish, you're never going to catch one.
We're going to start with the grip. The grip is the most important place to begin. The basic grip that I like is the thumb up. My hand is moved back on the rod handle. The thumb is right on top. What that does is that brings my thumb, my wrist, my arm, and the rod into a straight line. It's very important not to grip the handle real tightly, but to just simply hold the rod and kind of let it flex in your hand.
One thing that you want to do when you're gripping the rod is don't grip too tight. You're going to get hand fatigue, and you're not going to be as relaxed, which allows you to cast a little better.
It's very important to find a grip that works for you. I'm not telling you that one grip is better than another, but one that works for you. Actually, Wendy uses a grip different than mine.
Often for shorter, more accurate casts, I like to put my finger on top of the rod. This just gives me a little bit more control of the rod, and I can hit targets better.
There is one other grip. I don't use it, but a lot of people do. It's called a golf grip. It's where you take the thumb and rotate it off to the side. The index finger goes to the other side of the rod. The most important thing to remember is don't choke that rod grip. Just hold it very relaxed in your hand.
The most important thing is find a grip that makes you feel comfortable and works for you.
A fly rod is designed to cast a fly line. It is the mass of the fly line that carries the fly. Unlike spin fishing, where you're using a lure, a weighted object to carry your line out, it's the fly line that carries the fly in fly casting. We're going to watch Wendy cast here for a moment and discuss some terminology. We're going to talk about the stroke, which is the range of motion she's making with her arm and the fly rod. To understand what we're trying to achieve with the cast, it's very important to understand what the rod is doing and what your arm is doing during the cast. Often, less is more in fly casting. This motion here has very little to do with fly casting. I would rather you think of it as a small pull and a push. With the rod, small pull and a small push.
It's important to keep that rod tip traveling on a level plane. This allows the line to travel right over the tip and go to where you're casting. That fly will fall exactly where you want it to. The other thing to remember when you're casting is the rod is an extension of your arm, but you want it to do all the work for you. You don't want your arm to do the work.
To better understand what we're talking about, the plane of the rod tip, we're talking about that rod tip traveling in almost a straight line. It'll slightly raise in the back, slightly lower in the front. So pretend that my finger would be the rod tip. We're talking about a motion very similar to this motion right here. Now, this leads us right into another very important facet of fly casting. Where does my arm go? Where exactly is my arm during the cast? I often see people lift their arm up very high. If you do that for very long, you're going to get real tired. I like to keep my arm low, my elbow kind of relaxed close to my shoulder. Now, notice where Wendy's arm is during the casting stroke. She's not lifting it up very high. Also, it's very important to notice how short of a range of motion she's actually making with that arm. The easiest way to determine that is focus on the reel. Notice how short of range of motion that reel is traveling during the casting stroke. Very short range of motion.
One of the most common mistakes we see when people are learning to cast is breaking the wrist. And what happens is you open up the loop and your rod travels in a different plane. Whereas if you don't break the wrist, you end up keeping that rod tip at a level plane and you keep a nice tight loop.
Whenever you break your wrist on the back cast, what happens is the rod doesn't load. Now we're going to talk about rod loading.
get the rod to load is by a good, solid stop. That's how we load a fly rod.
What Wendy's talking about, loading the fly rod means making that fly rod bend. The basic principle of casting is I start with my rod tip low, bring the rod up to this position here, and notice by just simply stopping that fly rod, I make that fly rod bend. Then my fly line is sent back behind me. The weight of that fly line behind me keeps that rod bent or loaded. At this point, I need to bring the fly rod forward. Again, stop that fly rod. Notice by stopping that fly rod on the forward cast, it makes it bend again. That's where the power of the cast is developed and the fly line is propelled forward.
All of your power in a fly rod is right here. This is where you want to make the rod bend. So when you stop that rod, you have to give it a good stop to make this part work, because it does not flex as easy as this tip.
To understand what a cast should look like, I'm going to try to demonstrate it in slow motion. I'm going to bring the rod back, slowly accelerate it to a fast stop. At this point, I'm letting the fly line straighten behind me. When the fly line is perfectly straight behind me, I'm going to slowly accelerate to a very fast stop. Again, slow acceleration, fast stop, slow acceleration to a fast stop. One of the most difficult things is learning where that application of power should be. A good way to imagine this, Lefty just recently described, pretend you have a paintbrush in your hand. On the tip of this paintbrush is some paint. You want to throw this paint forward. If I start real fast right here, that paint's going to go straight up in the air and all over me. So I would start slow and stop fast. That's the same motion that we're trying to achieve in our cast. Slow acceleration to a fast stop.
Now you got to remember, as we've said, is to make the fly rod work down here in the butt. And that takes a good, solid stop.
We've talked about some of the principles of casting, but now we're going to put them into play. How do we do this? The very first thing that we always do is start by stripping all of the fly line that you're going to use for your cast off of your reel. This is stripping fly line off of your reel. Then I grab the fly, hold that fly tightly, because at this point, if I let go of that fly, the leader's still in my rod tip. It can end up back in the rod tip. So give it a pull so a little bit of fly line's out of the rod tip.
At this point, what we want to do is just get the line out of the rod tip. So shake it, shake the tip, do whatever it takes. You don't have to get that perfect stroke. You just want to get the line out. What we want to do is get that line straight out in front of you, and just get it straight out there so it's easier to pick up off the water.
It's important to understand that wherever the fly rod stops, that's where the line is going to go. As a result, if I take my fly rod and stop it way back behind me, I'm sending it into the water of the bushes behind me. That's not good. If I bring the rod tip real low in front of me, I'm sending it right onto the water. That's not what we want to do. So, by bringing the rod tip up here and stopping it fairly high, approximately at 1 o'clock. If we were looking at a clock like this would be 1 o'clock. That would be where I would stop my fly rod to send my line behind me. Boom.
Now, talking about stopping the rod at 1 o'clock or 10 o'clock, we hear that all the time. Gives you a great reference point, although a clock really doesn't have a lot to do with casting. But it does have a lot to do with where you're going to throw your line. One of the things is we don't always have perfect conditions. There could be trees behind you. You may have to shoot it high, straight up, or you may have to shoot it low. One thing to remember, though, on your forward cast is you never want to stop the rod too low and throw that fly into the water, because you're going to spook those fish. You want to stop your rod up high and allow that line to straighten out and then set it down.
The back cast is the most important part of our cast, and it's often the most neglected part of our cast because we don't see what's happening back here. But the whole concept is bringing the rod up, stopping it, and allowing that fly line to straighten behind you.
One thing to consider when you're casting is how you're going to control this line. We like to use our index finger and our thumb on our left hand if you're casting with your right, and your right hand if you're casting with your left, to hold the line to give you the control.
So I begin, my rod tip's low, all the slack is out. I grasp this line tightly. If I let the line slip at this point, notice my back cast does not work.
One thing that you can always do is watch your back cast. You need to look behind you anyway. What if there's a tree back there and you can't throw your fly? You don't want to throw it into the tree, although, you know, if you want to lose a lot of flies, you can do it. You want to stop it up higher. You'll actually lift your arm up to throw it up higher to avoid that tree. Or you could possibly have to throw the back cast into some bushes. In that case, then you might want to throw it real low, where it's almost a sidearm stroke, where you're throwing that fly underneath something.
We've talked about the importance of that powerful back cast. Now we're going to talk about timing, the importance of timing in your cast. As I send that fly line back behind me, right here, I stop the rod, the fly line straightens. At the apex of the line straightening, or at the time that it becomes perfectly straight behind me, my fly rod is bent. That's when I begin my forward cast.
One thing to remember, if you're doing a short cast, it's pretty quick, real small range of motion. As you get more line and do a longer cast, it's going to take longer to straighten out, and it's a longer range of motion.
So it's timing. If you have a short amount of line out of your rod tip and it's a short cast, you're very fast in your stroke. As you work out more line, you have to wait longer for that fly line to straighten behind you and in front of you. If you wait too long, then your fly line drops, hits the water, your rod loses its load.
Now that we've covered the back cast, let's go to the forward cast. It's important to remember it's almost exactly the same as the back, except for you can see exactly where your rod is stopping in front. You need to stop it high and allow that line to straighten out and present the fly. If you don't, you end up throwing it down into the water, you're going to end up splashing and spooking fish. And also, you have to remember that direction, that where you stop the tip of the rod, where you put that stop, is the direction of where that fly is going to travel. So if you turn it off to another direction, it's going to go that direction. So it's wherever you stop that rod is where that fly is going to go.
One of the most common mistakes we see people make is whenever they finish their forward cast, they have a tendency to dump that rod tip. They want to power into it. That's not the case. To finish your